When Jesus wore, oh, when he wore.
I want to welcome you to Trinity Episcopal Church. My name is Jane Bearden, and I'm the rector of Trinity here in Haverhill. This year, we have been treated to some beautiful pieces of art that were painted by a local artist, GayCox, who lives in Amesbury, Massachusetts. She's a deacon in the Episcopal Church, and she spent over 10 years preparing this exhibit. The exhibit is a series of paintings depicting faces that reflect the spiritual journey that we all make through our lives. The room that I'm in right now, the beginning room, is called the Room of Condemnation. And it shows the faces of condemnation, of telling us all of the things that make us feel not worthy, to make us feel like we have not accomplished anything, to make us feel like failures. They look at us and they transmit words like shame and foolishness. And they tell us, in fact, that we need to begin to bring ourselves to a place of feeling that shame. But in fact, that's not what we're called to do. In fact, we as Christians, we're not called to live in that place of condemnation. We're called to live in a place of joy, in a place of love, in a place of hope. And so that's really what this installation is about. It's about hope. It begins here in the Room of Condemnation, and then it moves through the 14 stations of the cross. And then it ends in the resurrection faces, the angelic hosts around the altar. Last Tuesday, I had a meeting, a meditation actually, a Lenten meditation, with a group of the Guild, a group of ladies from the church. And I invited them to walk with me through this installation, to look at the faces, but not to look at the faces as the faces of pain and hurt and the faces of death, but rather to look for the love in each one of the faces. I didn't really know what was going to happen, but when we came back together and we started talking about it, I heard the story of looking at the station of Mary receiving Jesus's body and her hands, and how that conveyed love. The image of the eyes of Jesus looking at Simon when he lifts the cross from Jesus' back. Thank you very much.
I don't know how to love him, what to do, how to move him. I've been changed, yes, really changed in these past few days. When I've seen myself, I seem like someone else. I don't know how to take this. I don't see why he moves me. He's a man. He's just a man.
Hello, my name is Brian Raish. I'm an intern here at Trinity Episcopal Church, and I'd like to welcome you to this exhibit as well. One of the most exciting parts of GayCox's Way of Salvation is the second part. They're Stations of the Cross. It's also known as the Way of Salvation. And there are 14 stations, and traditionally a community would gather, especially on Friday evenings in Lent. It would go from station to station, praying and journeying along with Jesus, his passion and death. The first station, Jesus is condemned to death. We work our way through to the 14th station, where Jesus is laid in the tomb. Stations of the Cross are very ancient and traditional practice in many churches, Catholic, Episcopal, Lutheran. It dates back to the time of St. Francis, who actually encouraged the practice. And of the 14 stations, some are a little more scriptural than others. Station 6, for example, we have Veronica wiping the face of Jesus, and she doesn't appear in the Bible, but we still commemorate this great act of kindness. For me, the Stations of the Cross are a way to pray during Lent. It's a reminder of Jesus' life. It's a reminder of the cross that we all sometimes carry in our own lives and how we move from death to new life at Easter. Thank you.
My name's Chris Serrato. I'm the senior warden here at Trinity Church. When we began planning to have this here, it was kind of interesting. We weren't sure exactly how it would fit into the church, if it would fit into the church, and who we'd get to do everything. It's worked out really well. The congregation came together really well, and getting it all set up was an interesting experience. It's really interesting in that as much stuff as there is in the church, it doesn't really seem smaller. It's a good way to interface with the community. It's a good way for people to actually stop and think about the things that are meaningful in this season, being Lent.
My name is GayCox, and I'm the artist who produced most of the original works in this installation. And I've been a professional artist for most of my life, but especially since I graduated with a diploma in painting from the Museum of Fine Arts School in Boston in the 80s. From then on, I sort of made my way in the world working at various part-time jobs. I was a wife and a mother, den mother, member of vestries, the usual life as well as painting. About 1989, I decided that I really needed to deal with some of the voices that we have in our head when we start a project. The kind of things that we imagine people saying, well, you'll never finish it, it's not good enough. And most artists always have at the back of their minds that they're trying to paint like Michelangelo or Rembrandt or Van Gogh. So I thought, I need to still these voices. I wanted to still the voices that are critical and judgmental. As a longtime Christian and being involved in church life, I thought I would try to bring my faith more deeply into my painting. And one of the starts I made was to take the judgments that people make of us and make this very claustrophobic first room, where it's all a matter of people judging us. And when people judge you, they're not very loving, and they're not very kind, and sometimes they're not very truthful. And so I took all those things I remembered people saying to me and making me believe, and all those pressures that we place on ourselves, and I decided I would bring them into the crucifixion. Because from my perspective, it's Christ has died for my sins, for my traumas, for my sufferings, for everything. And I did two things called Death of a Committee, which are not here, in which I took the incident of Christ's crucifixion and I sort of threw and pasted and painted all over him all the things that I was trying to get rid of, all those bad voices. In some 12-step programs, they call them bad tapes. As I was doing that, I became aware more of the traditions involved around the Stations of the Cross. I myself had never heard of them before, but I read up on them, and then I realized perhaps what God was calling me into was to use my art to enter that incredibly poignant and suffering journey that Christ took from the trial to the cross and to his death. And so the second part of this event is those 14 stations. And I painted them over a period of about 4 years. I started, funnily enough, with Station 1, but I didn't do them in order. And I'm just telling you a little bit of Station 1 to help you understand how I approach this. Station 1 is when traditionally they remember that Christ was flogged and brutalized by the Romans and mocked and spat on. So I took an old canvas, which was very lumpy, and I worked into it with the colors of bruising, blue and purple and red for the blood. I didn't try to make it look realistic. I wanted to evoke an emotion. I wanted people to realize, and myself to realize, this was real and it was an event that took place. And when I finished it, I attached 3 long, thick ropes to the back, and they come out of the bottom of the face, and they have knots in them, the heavy knots, to remind us of the flagellation that Rome executed on Christ. And then we go through the whole 14 stations. I don't have time to take you right now through the whole 14 stations, but they mark imaginatively events and situations that Christ might have encountered on that painful journey. There are 3 times he falls. There's the traditional Simon of Cyrene taking up the cross from his shoulders. There's a time he sees his mother. And what I had realized was I was meant to use the face for all of this. So except for the 14th station, which you see behind me, there is only one face that is visible, and it is Christ's. The final station I did was station, let me get it right, 10, because that's when he's stripped. And I thought, how can you show someone being stripped of their clothes with you just use their face? So I imagined what someone might look like who'd just been in a boxing match with Muhammad Ali, and had come out really the worse for wear, bruised and broken. The death, the station where he dies, is a diptych, as if the whole thing is closed. Everything is done. He's dead. With each station, there is his number and this text I used when I was painting. And as I say, these aren't meant to be images of Jesus as he might have looked, although when I do show him in the colors of earth and brown, it's more Jewish. I wanted him to look Jewish because he was Jewish. But the whole point is to create an emotional tie to them. You can read the texts, you can carry them around with you, and you can do the traditional walk around from 1 to 14. I knew the next part was going to be this large curtain over here, which is technically what I call a fragment of the temple curtain. Christians know that the temple curtain itself was enormous, and it marked the point beyond which no one but the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was encased in gold, so I imagine the whole back of that curtain fragment is gold, lame, to represent that. And then we know that when he was crucified and died, the curtain of the temple was rent in 2 from the top to the bottom. So I try to imagine what the cherubim and seraphim might be like, saying, "Holy, holy, holy, Lord God of Sabaoth," and what it would be like to find a fragment, a reminder, an architectural fragment of that curtain. I always knew the last 2 parts would be the angels, and that they would be displayed as banners after a long, hard-fought war. Any of you have ever seen some of the memorial services at places like the Marine Chapel, you see all around you the flags from their various campaigns and the ribbons. And so I imagine now in heaven, now we've gone through and we're in heaven, the angels are now at rest in some way. And here we have mementos of them. We have an angel devoted to children. We have an angel devoted to those who were healed at the pool of Bethsaida. So each of those comes with their own scriptural text. But the interactive part, which I always knew was going to be there, are the faces. And the faces are jeweled because in the final part of the scripture, the Bible, it tells us where the new heaven and new earth come, that the New Jerusalem is just like one big bling. There's masses of gorgeous jewelry, there's wonderful things, there's beauty everywhere. And finally, I, by God's grace, hit upon doing these circles which are foam core and which everyone can do to remember those that have died. I do have to say that I wouldn't have been able to finish this. I finished all the work and then I put it away, my paintings, and I didn't know what to do because the idea of putting it together was so incredibly expensive. And unbeknown to me, for 8 years, a group of people have been praying about supporting it. And one day they informed me I had this amount of money. My jaw dropped open. And their faithfulness enabled me to complete the entire project and mount it. The other side to this, and you can see it down here on the floor for this station, is I asked 14 women. I gave them each a station they couldn't choose. I gave it to them anonymously. They didn't know which one it was. And I simply asked them to put together some artifacts, some objects, that to them held the meaning of that station. So as we're standing in front of station 14, which is when he's put in the grave, this friend of mine picked linen wraps, which they put around the body. She picked white linen for the head. There were 2 pieces of sandstone from Jerusalem itself, and a box that would contain the myrrh and the fine spices needed for a burial. Other people chose different things for their station, and we mount them on tables here for people to pick up. Because essentially, I think it's important for us to know that this really is a historical thing. Christ's suffering is real. The beatings were real. The crucifixion is real. The objects help remind us of the physicality of our salvation and the length to which God went to find us and bring us home to himself. And then finally, people are invited to make memorials. The faces, the gorgeous glittering faces, are made by people to remember their loved ones. Some people have written letters on them. One child wrote to his grandfather, "Grandpa, I really miss you. I miss your fishing. I miss going camping. But I know you're happy in heaven." So they're very wonderful ways that we can also remind ourselves of something which we sometimes feel is remote, and that is heaven and paradise. But it isn't. It is a promise. It's a promise God makes. It's a promise God will keep. And there will come a time when we shall rejoice there. The largest painting in the section with the angels is called The Celebration in Heaven. And I imagine people having a wild party, and musicians, when they play, will tell you it's like they become one with their instruments. So I imagine all these musicians, their fingers turning to keys on the piano, the music notes being real when they come out of their mouths, just everything just becoming so real that they can't separate the people from the music. And that's the celebration that all Christians have to look forward to, and actually for everyone, because this is meant for everyone to come through and enjoy. I've had people who have no Christian faith come through. They say the faces remind them of the prayer flags in, I think it's Buddhist worship. There's something about this which, by God's grace, I was able to envision. But for me personally, I think the thing that I want everybody to understand is, underneath all this is the great love that God has for everyone, for you, for me, no matter who we are, where we are, what we do, and that it's love that did this.
Welcome. So welcome to Trinity Episcopal Church, and welcome to this amazing, it's not really an exhibit, it's an experience of art by the Reverend Deacon GayCox from Amesbury, and I hope you enjoy yourselves. We're also going to be treated tonight to the Quartet Forte, and Lauren Lee is on the violin. I have heard him in amazing.
Good evening, everyone. This is Quartet Forte. Thank you for having us. We're very happy to be here. I'd like to introduce the members of the quartet. We have Caroline Lieber on violin, John Bumstead on cello, and Karen McConaughey on viola. Hello, this is Quartet Forte. I'd like to introduce our members. John Bumstead on cello, Lauren Lee, myself on violin, Caroline Lieber on violin, and Karen McConaughey on viola. We were invited to play this evening at Trinity Episcopal Church in Haverhill for their Lenten Journey art exhibit, presented by Reverend Deacon GayCox. And we chose selections that we felt were inspired by the Lenten season. We look forward to performing here again soon. Thank you.
happy day. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. When Jesus was Oh, when he was, when Jesus was, washed our sins away, Lord. Oh, it's a happy day. Happy day.